raise your right hand and face the pulpit. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give on this call shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Escobar.
Good afternoon, Mr. Sillis.
Hi.
Would you please state your full name for the record?
John P. Sillis.
And Mr. Sillis, can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what your occupation is?
I'm the owner of Innovative Surveillance, LLC, in Melbourne, Florida.
And can you tell us what that business entails?
Installation and maintenance of video security equipment.
And how long have you been doing that?
Since 2003.
Okay, and so you were obviously in that business in 2013 and 2014, is that correct?
Correct.
And was one of your clients the Cobb Theater?
Yes.
I'm going to direct your attention to January the 13th of 2014 and ask you if you received a phone call from management at the Cobb Theater.
Yes, I did.
And what did that call entail?
Objection, hearsay.
Just to show his actions.
We don't want to hear what the conversation was, but the gist of
Okay,
what
I can rephrase it so that
sustained.
as a result of that conversation, were you directed to go to the Cobb Theater?
Yes.
And what were you directed to go do at the Cobb Theater?
To go to the IT room and remove all the hard drives from all the recorders.
And when were you expected to do that?
They said as soon as possible.
Did that indicate that day on the 13th you were supposed to do it?
Yes, I went there that night.
And did they also want you to fly those hard drives that night?
Objection, all hearsay.
Were you supposed to fly those hard drives to Alabama that night?
They requested it, but I told...
Just to show his further actions.
Still hearsay.
Yeah, I don't know what exception there would be. I'll sustain.
Did you agree to go to Alabama with those hard drives and deliver them to Cobb Theater?
No.
Okay. So, as a result of that conversation, did you in fact go to the Cobb Theater?
Yes.
And that's here in the Wesley Chapel area?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. About what time do you think that you arrived at the Cobb Theater?
There's no way I can remember that. It was in the evening. It was dark out. That's all I remember.
Okay. And when you arrived, was there someone stationed there at the Cobb Theater, a police officer?
There were many police officers stationed there.
Okay. And did you have to speak to those police officers prior to gaining entry into the Cobb Theater?
Yes, several.
And what did you tell those police officers in order to gain entry into the Cobb Theater?
Objection, hearsay.
What he told them? He's subject to cross-examination. It's not hearsay.
I'll overrule.
Well, I just want to make sure, just approach it.
Yeah.
In order to gain entry into the Cobb Theater.
It seems like they knew ahead of time I was going to be there because I told them who I was and they said, come on in.
So you told the officer, hey, this is who I am, and they said, just come on in?
Yeah.
Okay. And so where did you go there at the theater? Did you go to the IT room?
Yes, that's where, that's where I had to go because that's where the recorders were. I knew the location and someone had unlocked the door to let me in.
Okay, and do you know who unlocked the door in order to let you in?
I do not recall.
Okay. And so that, and I'm calling it an IT room, I don't know if that's what they call it, but let's call it a video surveillance room.
Yeah, or server room. Server room is more
There you go.
appropriate.
So that's upstairs, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And you are familiar with that system, are you not?
Yes.
Not bec-
This is direct examination.
we've also have an order. This is a state witness that we're calling.
No,
Was he?
Probably.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, when you got there, you went upstairs, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And when you went up there, were you familiar with that system?
Yes.
And how was it that you were familiar with that system?
I built it years
You
ago.
built- You built the system?
Yeah.
Would you maintain the system as well?
Yes.
And so I would imagine, would you also visit and frequent the Cobb Theater to do regular maintenance?
Whenever they called, yes.
Okay. And so, did you know how that system operated? In other words, did you know what DVR and what hard drive worked with what cameras?
Not exactly, because I didn't install the cameras. I took the system over from another company years ago, and the cameras last longer than recorders do typically, so the cameras are original from way before me, but the recorders were relatively new.
Okay, and so you didn't know which hard drives would be capturing the information from which cameras is what you're telling me, is that correct? Who would have known that? Do you know?
They're IT people.
Okay, meaning cops,
Correct.
IT people.
Correct.
Okay, and so you get there, and what do you do?
They told me just take all the hard drives out, pack them,
Objection, this is hearsay.
Sustained.
What did you do?
remove the hard drives.
Okay, so how many DVRs were there in that system?
I believe 5.
And how many hard drives did each system have?
Each one had 2 for the video and 1 for the operating system.
So that would have been
Three per
three
recorder.
per DVR.
Correct.
That would have made 15 hard drives.
Yes.
Okay. And so you took all those out, and what did you do with them?
Just pack them up to prepare them for shipping, put them in a box, and that was it.
Okay, and who did you hand those hard drives to?
It was a representative from Cobb Corporate.
That had flown down from
Yes.
Cobb Corporate
Right.
that very night?
Yes.
And so you handed that to that individual, and he or she took possession of it?
Yes.
Okay. And did you do anything else there that particular night?
That was it.
Okay. Did you provide them at any point in time with any type of equipment so that they could continue to operate, their business?
I brought over some loaners later on after the theater reopened. They were closed for a while. I just can't recall for
Okay.
how long or when I got back.
Okay. And did you change their system at all at any point in the future?
No, as far as I recall, I just got everything running again, and it was back to the way it normally was.
Did there come a point in time, sir, that you actually replaced their entire system?
You mean after the event?
Yes.
See, at one time we went through an upgrade of recorders, replacing old ones with new ones, and I just can't recall if this happened before or after.
Okay.
It's too many years to go back.
I got you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Cross?
You have a moment?
Yeah. Okay.
So you indicated there were 15 hard drives total, correct?
Yes,
Okay, 5 DVRs. That's a digital video recorder?
right.
All right. And then you said each one has 2 video and 1 operating system, correct?
Typically, yes.
Okay. Or are you talking about this one or just typically?
I'm not 100% sure they are all populated like I mentioned, but I think they were. Like I said, we're going back quite a few years.
Okay, so you're saying then, in this case, you're just not sure?
Right.
All right. But
90% sure.
okay.
Best I could do.
All right, we'll give you 90% sure.
Okay.
All right. So when you say operating system, that's not videos. That's kind of just like maybe the player, so to speak, something like that?
Like Windows.
Okay. So then we have, what, 10 video and 5
That would-
Windows operating systems?
That would be correct, yeah.
Okay. And the videos would just be from different cameras within the entire theater complex?
Yes.
Do you know how many cameras were in Theater 10?
Not exactly, because the recorders did not have every single channel populated. Every recorder could handle 16 cameras, but they did not have 16 times 5 cameras total.
Okay, and then all the entire operating system was for everything in the Cobb Theater, and this is kind of what I'm getting at. So let's say theater number 10 had 2 cameras. There was cameras at the concession area, cameras at the ticket area, cameras in the lobby area. That's what we mean by all the videos, correct?
Correct.
All right, so when we're talking about 10 different videos, it's for the entire Cobb Theater area.
Yes, that would be correct.
Okay. Have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
Nothing further, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any redirect? May this witness be released?
Yes, John.
All right. Mr. Sillis, you're free to go. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Who's next?
Defense calls Jennifer Shaw.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give in this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Michaels.
Please state your name.
Jennifer Shaw.
Okay. Do you know this gentleman right here, Mr. Curtis Reeves?
Yes, sir, I do.
How do you know him?
He's my father.
So your maiden name is Reeves,
Yes, sir.
and what do you do for a living?
I am a vice president for a large national bank.
We're going to talk about some of your observations and maybe some of your experiences growing up that relate to your parents. And so Vivian Reeves is your mother.
Yes, sir.
Your parents and their physical activities and your observations through the years, okay?
Okay.
All right. Now,
Your Honor, may I check?
Yeah.
Briefly.
as I was saying, we're going to talk about your observations of your mother and father as you grew up, and then as you got older, and then as they got older. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Now, as a family, when you were younger, what sort of activities, physical activities, did you all do as a family?
Most of the things we did as a family was outdoors.
For instance, what?
We took family vacations every year. A lot of times those consisted of camping, hiking, fishing, bicycling, just about everything outdoors. My brother was active in Boy Scouts. I was active in Girl Scouts. My dad was very active in Boy Scouts, taught my brother's soccer team. So most of what we did was physical and outside.
Okay, and so you saw your father was very strong. He could hike, right? With
Yes,
you
sir.
all? Is that true? And your mother, could she do that as well?
Yes, sir, she did. We were kids, so we could keep up with her then.
Okay. And so then in terms of camping, would your father set up the camp for everyone?
We all had responsibilities, but yes, I mean, obviously he orchestrated what needed to be done, but we were all assigned different tasks and different ways of helping. So it was a team effort.
Now, you know that, you know what your father did for a living as you were growing up into your teenage years, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And what did he do?
He was a captain for the City of Tampa Police Department.
And was your father a person that, for instance, went running on a regular basis?
He did. At that time, he ran. He started having trouble running, so he switched to cycling, which was less impact on his body.
Okay. And so you saw him at least at some point not able to run anymore.
Correct.
Okay. And so he took up bicycling. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, you got married,
Yes.
right? Okay. And did you marry a police officer?
I did. He also was a City of Tampa police officer.
All right. But then at some point, that didn't work out. Is that correct?
Correct.
And so, we're going from, kind of have a cutoff point at January 13th of 2014. We're going to look before that, okay?
Okay.
Now, as an adult, you were out of the house, but did you visit your parents regularly?
Yes, sir. We visited regularly, would go out to dinner and meet for dinner. Sometimes we did activities, and we still did family vacations in the fall where my family, Matt, and my parents, we'd rent a house together and go up to the mountains.
Okay. And when you would go out with them as you got older, did you notice anything about their physical appearance? In other words, for instance, did you look at your father's hands and see any difference?
Oh, yes. They started looking like old man hands.
And what about your mother's hands?
Same thing.
Now, at some point, you actually moved into the same house as them, their house.
I did.
And when was that?
That was in April of 2013.
Okay. And did you have a child?
I did. She had just turned a year old in February.
Okay. And is that Madison?
Correct.
And so she was a year old when you moved into the home,
Yes, sir.
and that was in 2013.
Yes, sir.
So between 2013 and January of 2014, you were living with your mother
That's correct.
and your father,
Yes, sir.
and Madison, as you split custody with.
Correct.
Okay. With your now ex-husband. Now, as you saw your parents on a daily basis, did you make observations regarding, for instance, different things that they were unable to do? Well, let me ask you this. Let's go back a little bit. One of the things you talked about is kayaking. That's something you did with your father
Yes, sir.
and your mother.
Yes.
Was there a time that you can tell us about where it kind of hit you that your father couldn't do the things he used to be able to do when it came to kayaking? Maybe sometime before 2014.
Yes, sir. It was actually, I moved into their house. I left my husband in April of 2013 and moved into their home. We actually went kayaking that very same month, which is the last time we went kayaking all together as a family. And Matt was with us. It was me and then both of my parents, my mother and father.
And Matt's your brother?
Correct. So we went on the kayaking trip, and the kayak paddles are two-part paddles where you have to press in a little button and pull them apart. And it was a harsh reality as a child to see your father not be able to do that. He asked me for help to pull him apart.
Okay. At some point, you and your husband had a motorcycle,
We did.
and your mom and dad had one too.
Yes, sir.
Did you used to go on trips together?
We did. We rode with them some locally, and this would have been from a time frame. It would have been before I was pregnant with my daughter, so it would have been, 2011 or prior. So we rode some with them locally, and then we also trailered the bikes up to the mountains and rode some as well.
Okay. Now, what sort of observations did you make of your father getting onto the motorcycle? Was it easy? Could he just swing his leg over and get on the seat?
No, sir. It was actually quite frightening thinking that that he had to hold that thing up and get himself on, and then it was even more frightening to see my mom try to get on. Once they got on and got situated, they could go okay, but the getting on and off was rough.
Again, what sort of realization, what hit you about seeing that?
Just that.
Can we refresh?
Yes. Get seated, but just for a moment, please. Thanks. Okay, you want to bring him in? Thank you.
Jurors are in the courtroom, Your Honor. Jurors may be seated.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy. Go ahead, Mr. Michaels.
We were talking about the one trick that you remember specifically, where you were with your then husband on a motorcycle, your father was with your mother, mom and dad on their motorcycle, and you were talking about how your father had frightened you because he couldn't get on, and your mother also kind of
Injection leading.
Well, I'm just giving background to the question. I'm gonna ask a different question.
I'll allow it for this purpose.
And
I
you-
will.
And you testified how your mother, when she got on the back, you were even more frightened. Tell me how that impacted you in terms of realizing that, now your parents weren't these strong people taking care of you and they had somehow changed. Tell me what your thoughts were when you saw that.
Objection, relevance, what her thoughts are on her parents changing.
I'll overrule.
Go ahead.
I think it's a hard, like I mentioned before, it's a harsh reality when your parents have always been able to do everything. They've always set the pace for your family growing up, and always been so active, and just to see that that's not the case anymore. And I don't think they really considered themselves having difficulty or what have you. They wanted to live and still enjoy
Objection, Your Honor,
things.
this is going beyond the scope of the question.
All right.
We'll move on a little, Your Honor.
Thank you.
That's fine. And so, I'm not here to suggest that your mom and dad were somehow invalids. I mean, your father, can you see he's using a cane now? You know that, right?
Yes.
And certainly back then, he wasn't using a cane.
No, sir.
We're talking about 2013, 2014, you were living with him.
Correct.
In fact, your father was still pretty active, right?
Yes,
Is that, would you agree with me? I mean, did he mow the yard?
Yes, sir.
It was a ride-on mower, right?
Of course.
Did he or your mother trim the hedges as far as you knew while you were living there?
Yes, when I would leave for work, so I wasn't watching them do it. But I know that Dad would plan to. They would plan to do any yard work first thing in the morning, so that it was still cool outside and they could take before the heat of the day. But when I would leave for work, when I'd come home from work, it would be done. So
I mean, you would agree with me or disagree that your father and mother, they were still active and able to work around the house?
yes, sir.
Another hobby of your father's is sporting clays, or was sporting clays.
Yes, sir.
And tell us about that. What does shooting sporting clays mean?
Sporting clays is where there's typically a course set up with different stations, and at each of the stations there are, at the place that we went to, there are mechanical machines that throw what's referred to as a pigeon, or a clay pigeon. It's a piece of clay, a round piece of clay, and it slings it up into the air, and then you use a shotgun to shoot that clay.
Okay. And did your father teach you how to do that? How to shoot sporting clays?
Yes, sir. Between my father, my brother, and my ex-husband, yes.
And is that something you would do together?
Yes, sir, we did on occasion.
Now, at some point through 2014, through January, your father was still able to do that, was he?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And do you have to walk that, what you call a course?
You don't have to. You can rent a golf course, or you can choose a golf cart, or you can choose to walk, but we walked the course.
At some point, did your father get a lighter gun to more easily, that was more easy to handle,
Yes, sir, he did.
and to do the clay shooting or sporting clays?
Yes, sir.
Now, at the time when you were living with your mother and father, you said your daughter was living there, Madison?
Correct.
And how old was she?
When we moved in, she was 13 months old.
And would you take walks around the block with your father and mother with Madison in a wagon?
We did. I would pull Madison in a wagon, and then I usually had my dog with me, too.
Okay. And what about your father? He's pulled Madison in the wagon.
Yes, sir, he did when she was little.
Now, at the time you were living at the house, your father would also ride a bicycle.
Correct.
Right? He was able to do that.
Yes, sir.
So let's talk about some of the other things you noticed. Would you agree or disagree with me that when you were living with your mother and father, your mom and dad, you saw them every day, that you saw things that you didn't see in terms of their aging process when you would just see them for dinner or to get together or that sort of thing? Would you agree with me or disagree with that?
Agree. Yes, sir.
Let's talk about some of the things that you noticed. Did you notice, for instance, your father being very susceptible or cutting easy? In other words, did you see him brush against a tree and have his skin cut?
Sure, actually both of them, that would be applicable to both of them. Their skin, both of them, is like tissue thin, and just bumping it on this counter would cause it to kind of wrinkle up and bruise and bleed. And
Would you say that your experience living there, that you had trouble seeing, that you saw your parents, your mother and father, mom and dad, have trouble functioning on a daily basis, doing some very rudimentary things, some very routine things?
yes, sir. I think, well, when you hear about it when you're not living there, and prior to living there, you hear about their doctor's appointments numerous times. I was at the doctor Monday. It seemed like they were at the doctor all the time. You hear about their different ailments. But then when I moved in, I started to see all of those things. I started to see how, like I said, their skin, when they would bump up against something, it felt like every week I was coming home to somebody being injured and having a bandage on them. I saw how my dad would reach down to try to pick Madison up, and sometimes he could pick her up, but there were other times where he couldn't, and he would put her back down. Just, I don't know if it was the way he was standing or what. I saw where, and I had heard about this, but I hadn't seen it, where his fingers would lock up and he wouldn't be able,
Objection, hearsay.
and he wouldn't be able
Objection,
to.
hearsay.
Sustained.
Okay, did you see his fingers lock up?
I did.
Okay, and tell us about that. Tell us about that observation.
It's just, and his hands weren't like that all the time. It would just be on occasion, his fingers would lock up, and sometimes it was just one, and sometimes it was multiple. And I mean, it's definitely different. I don't know what causes that, but yes, I've seen it.
Did you see him have trouble eating his cereal because of his fingers locking up?
Yes, sir.
What about playing with your daughter? Did you see him ever get on the floor with her?
Yes, sir. He did. It was very rare that he got on the floor with her. At that point in time, she wasn't walking yet, so he would get down there on occasion, and it was very difficult for him to get back up.
Did you ever see when he needed help getting up?
He would usually pull over a chair
So you're saying how he bruises very easily.
Correct.
All right. And, and just from touching something.
Not touching something, but if you like bang your arm on something or hit it on something or were to scrape it on this counter or something like that, yes.
Okay. And I would assume then if he got hit with an object in the head, based on what you're saying about how easily he bruises, we'd see a fairly significant bruise then on his face, right?
I wouldn't know that because I would think that your skin on your arms has more give, where your skin on your face is harder. So I don't know. I don't know how but you bruise differently on different parts of your body. You know that.
All right. Let's since you threw it back that way, let's talk about that. So your skin near your cheekbone. I mean, would you agree with me that that's fairly thin? Because right underneath that skin part's hard bone, right?
I don't know medically where your skin is
We're
thicker
gonna
or
check.
thinner.
All right.
I don't.
Sustained. Move on.
If the defendant was punched in the face, then based on what you're saying about how easily he would bruise, would you expect to have seen a bruise if he was
Judge, I'm
punched in the
gonna
face?
object again, she's not a medical expert, she's not an EMT. There is absolutely no basis for these questions.
All sustained. Move on.
All right, so let's talk about when you started living with the defendant. It was April 28th of 2013, right?
I know it was April. I don't remember the exact day.
Okay. I mean, it's not important. I could show your deposition, but you're just saying it was in April.
Yes, sir.
All right. And based on your testimony, in those 10 months, you were able to observe him around the house, things that he could do, things that he couldn't do, and you testified to some of those here today, correct?
Correct.
All right. And again, just sounds like aging issues that most people have, correct?
I don't know what's normal for most people.
Mhm.
I can tell you what I observed for my parents.
Okay. How about his vision back in 2014? Was it 2020 with the glasses, do you know?
I don't think his vision was 20/20, and I know that he also had floaters in his eyes that sometimes obstructed his vision. Not complete obstruction, but where it would be something that he would see in his vision as he looked. But I believe he was wearing glasses then as well.
Okay, but you don't know if his vision was 20/20?
I do not know.
All right, and I guess you were describing his back wasn't very good?
Correct.
All right. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being his back was terrible, where would you put it?
Oh, I wouldn't begin to know his pain level. I know that he
I wasn't
stopped.
asking about his pain level. Well, what did you observe? On a scale of 1 to 10, when you said he's having back issues, what did you observe?
I would say that he had stopped running way prior to that because he had sciatic nerve issues. He had
Your Honor,
back
I'd ask you to
issues.
direct the witness to please answer the question.
She's answering the question, Your Honor. She's
All
answering the
right. All
question.
right.
I'll tailor it a little bit more for
Thank
you,
you.
okay? I'm talking about in 2013, okay? And we're going to talk up until the point in time of the shooting in 2014, okay? When you're saying that you saw that he was having difficulty with his back, I'm just asking you this, on a scale of 1 to 10, what did you see about how bad his back problem was? That's my question.
It's just a complete guess, but I'm going to say a 5 or 6.
And you're guessing, but why are you guessing? It's your own personal observation.
I know. It's a guess. I don't know how he felt about his
I'm not asking
level
you how
of
he
back.
felt. I'm asking you what you personally observed.
Okay, 5 or 6.
Could he stand for extended periods of time?
Yes.
Could he sit for extended periods of time?
Yes. He's doing that now.
He have arthritis?
I'm sorry?
Did he have arthritis in 2013?
I believe he did, yes.
Okay, did he have arthritis in 2014?
I would assume that it didn't go away.
Okay, because that's something once you get it, it stays.
Correct.
Did it affect his fingers, the way he can grab things and do things?
That may have been part of the reason why his fingers lock up. I'm not sure the medical reason behind that.
Okay, I wasn't asking you the medical reason, okay? Did he have difficulties doing things because of the arthritis?
He had difficulty doing things with his hands, yes. I
Okay.
don't know if it was due to the arthritis or due to another issue.
Okay, so The home that you're talking about, we're not gonna give the address, but it was in Brooksville?
Correct.
And they sold a house in order to move into that home in Brooksville, right?
Correct.
Okay, when I say they, obviously I'm talking about your parents.
Yes.
All right. Based on the issues that you're describing, did they downsize so they didn't have to do much maintenance to the house, so they didn't have to do yard work, things like that?
No, they didn't, but that was in 2005, I believe they moved to Brooksville.
Okay. Pretty big house?
It's a good-sized home. I'm probably about 2,400 square feet,
Okay. How much land?
right about an acre.
And I think you indicated on direct examination something about mowing, so did, and you were there since 2013, so we're just talking about 2013 up until the time of the shooting, okay? Did he have a lawn maintenance company?
No, he did not.
He mowed the lawn himself?
My mother would do it on occasion as well.
Okay. Well, you testified during direct that your father would do the mowing?
The majority of the time, but I've seen my mother mow as well.
Okay. Your mother, that was deteriorating as well?
Correct.
All right. And when we say mowing, we're talking about an electric riding mower?
Correct.
All right, for that whole acre of land, obviously.
Correct.
All right. And that probably wouldn't take 5 minutes, would it?
To mow an
Yeah,
acre?
to mow sitting on a mower, an entire acre of land, that would take some time, wouldn't it?
Correct.
All right, just a lot of balancing, a lot of sitting,
Yes.
a lot of movement with the hands, gripping on things, steering, things like that?
It's not a lot of movement. It's a zero turn.
No? Okay. I mean, well, then you have to go up and back, and, once you go all the way forward, I know this is a silly question, then you gotta turn around, come all the way back, and you gotta turn around, go all the way back.
Correct.
Okay. I mean, it'd be a lot of turns, right?
Sure.
And I'd imagine he had to do that kind of frequently, especially in the summer here in Florida, right?
From mowing my own yard, I would say yes frequently, but I don't know how frequently he mowed.
Okay, even though you were living there for that whole year?
Correct. I worked during the day, and they did their yard work when I was at work.
Okay, but when you came home, you knew the yard was done?
Sure, but I didn't come home and say, "Wow, the yard's done every day or every week," or I didn't always notice those things.
Okay. And in the backyard, he had an archery area set up?
Correct.
Because archery is one of his hobbies.
Yes, it was.
All right, so he had some bows, right?
Yes.
What kind of bows did he have?
He had recurves and compound bows.
Okay. Special arrows for those, right?
I don't know what
You
type of
don't know?
arrow they take.
Okay. And when he shoot them, they go into a portable bag?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so portable meaning that he'd have to take it out, put it back. I'm not saying all the time, but he would take it out and put it back, right?
I remember it sitting out in the yard most of the time.
So he mowed around it?
It was in an area where there was no grass under trees.
That was one of his favorite hobbies, right?
At one point in his life, yes.
Well, he was doing it around this period of time too, right?
Way less frequently than he had ever done it before, but yes,
Right.
he was still doing
He
it.
was still doing the archery.
Correct.
And he did still hunt, right?
I
In
believe
2013?
I believe he did. Yeah, I believe him and my brother had planned a hunting trip.
Okay. And
I
then when
believe
they would
that
go
also-
hunting, he would practice a little bit more with the bow and arrow in the backyard, right?
It's my understanding that he practiced, he'd go out and shoot a couple arrows and then come in, go out and shoot a couple more, come in, and did it throughout the day because he didn't have the stamina to just be out there and practice like he normally would.
Okay. We'll talk about the stamina in the next section. When he was doing yard work, would he do electric clippers, manual clippers?
He owns both, but I don't know because I didn't witness it.
Okay, and I know a lot of these questions are going to sound silly, but I'm really just asking because of the way you described him, and that's why I'm kind of going through these physical things with you. Okay, so when you cut the hedges, that obviously requires some hand strength, right?
Correct.
And if they're electric ones, you got to hold it up, and you have some shoulder strength because you got to do the hedges, right?
Correct.
Power wash at the house. Would he power wash?
Yes, I do remember seeing him doing that.
Okay, and I think there was a pretty decent sized patio at the house, right?
The back porch, yes.
Okay, and he would pressure wash or power wash the back patio.
Correct.
All right, and you'd agree with me that pressure washing or power washing, I don't know if you've ever done it, it's a fairly tedious job, right?
Yes.
All right, I mean, you have like the sprayer, you have this really large area, the sprayer seems like it does like 2 centimeters at a time, right?
Well, it depends on what nozzle you're using, but yes.
Right, okay, I mean, even the biggest nozzle, you think it's gonna take a lifetime to finish, right?
I wouldn't know.
Okay, you wouldn't know. All right. Would you agree with me then, but it does take a long time to pressure wash, especially what you called a fairly large patio.
Are you telling me that or asking me that?
Well, I'm asking you that.
Yeah. I remember helping him several times pressure washing the back patio. What you're also not taking into consideration
Your
is
Honor,
that
I'd object, I'm not asking that
She's
question.
answering your question, Your Honor.
is
Well, I
No.
think she's, yeah.
Yeah, overruled any objection. Just, you can redirect.
I mean, a pressure wash, you have to hold, you hold like a nozzle, right? You're going back and forth, you're using your shoulders, you're using your hands a lot, right?
I think you can lock the nozzle down. I don't think you have to hold it down the whole time.
Okay, but what about the stick itself? Don't you have to hold that and move it up and down, back and forth?
Yes, you would.
And how many cars did your parents have?
Just 2 vehicles. They each had one.
Okay, and what type of vehicle did the defendant have?
He had a Ford Explorer.
And that's a big SUV?
It's not very big. It's what I have now. I would say mid-size.
Okay, it is an SUV?
Correct.
All right, and the other kind of car was what?
I think at the time Mom had a Honda Accord.
Okay, and who would wash the cars?
Dad would wash the cars, typically
Okay.
with a long-handled brush.
All right, and who would vacuum?
I think sometimes my mother did it, but I'm not saying he never did it. I don't know. So I think they probably shared that responsibility.
Would he wash your mom's car as well?
Yes, he would wash both cars.
Okay, and then for convenience purposes, would he do them at the same time?
I don't know that.
Okay, would he wash your car?
No.
All right, so you say he used a long handle brush?
Correct.
All right, and again, I know these sound like silly questions, but since we're talking about his physical ability, that's why I'm asking him. So, when he would wash the car, then he would have to take this long-handled brush, right?
Mhm.
Okay, and then put soap on it, and well, I guess first what do? You have to use the hose to water the car, right?
Okay.
Well, I'm asking you.
Sure.
Okay, and then he'd use a long-handled brush to do the entire car, right?
Yes.
All right, and that would take some shoulder movement,
Correct.
all right, standing for a while to wash the car.
Yes.
Would have to use his back, obviously, to wash the car, right?
Sure.
All right, use his fingers to grip everything, correct?
Yes.
Bending down to do the tires, going up above the SUV, all of that bending, back, shoulder, correct?
Okay. Yes.
All right. And then you have to do the same thing again with your mom's car.
If he did her car in the same day.
Okay. And again, I know it sounds silly, but then he'd have to dry both cars.
I dry my car by driving around the block. I don't know how he drives his car.
Okay. Is the Honda a more compact car?
I don't know if it's considered compact or mid-size.
Okay. Your father, I know it sounds weird when I say the defendant, but he was 6'2", about 270 around the time of the shooting?
I'm not certain what he weighed at the time of the shooting. I mean, I know he had gotten way heavier because he was less active than he had been, but I don't know what he weighed or.
Okay. Was it difficult for him with his back issues to get in and out of the Honda Accord?
I don't recall observing that.
No. So he was okay to do that?
Objection, she said she didn't recall, Your Honor. I've been asked to answer.
All right, sustain.
You said they were fairly active, so did they go out and do things?
They were active. They did go out and do things. I'm not sure what kind of things. I mean, they went to the movies, they went out to dinner, they went to church on a regular basis. They were heavily involved with their Sunday school class.
Okay. So what I'm getting at is the amount of driving that they were doing. Getting into the SUV, getting out of the SUV, getting in the Accord, getting out of the Accord, driving around for long periods of time. If they were active, that was something that the defendant was able to do fairly regularly then, correct?
Yes, he was able to do that.
And would your father drive mostly?
Yes.
Pretty much any time that they went out, he would be the driver.
Predominantly, yes.
So obviously you didn't have any difficulty using the steering wheel, using the the knobs, the levers, everything it takes to drive a car.
No, not that I ever saw.
All right, now I know you weren't painting this picture, but, again, you know the reason why I'm asking you these questions. He didn't have any difficulty dressing himself, right?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, well, you
I
were
think
living
he
there.
did, but I certainly didn't know how he dressed himself. I do remember them talking about him having trouble buttoning his buttons on his shirts.
Okay, so you're saying that he wasn't self-sufficient?
I didn't say he didn't get it done, but if he had difficulty doing it, just about everything he's done, he's accomplished. He just may have had difficulty doing it, or may have spaced it out, or done it for shorter periods of time.
Would you say that he was able to put on his own shirt?
I never heard my mother say she had to dress him.
I'm just asking you personally. You know if he could put on his own shirt?
To my knowledge, yes.
Could he put on his own pants?
To my knowledge, yes.
His own shoes?
To my knowledge, yes.
Tie his own shoes?
There were occasions where his hands would lock up or he would have trouble bending down. So I think that although he could mostly tie his own shoes the majority of the time, I think there were times when he had difficulty.
Okay. Do you remember being asked that question at another hearing or deposition on October 15th of 2015, whether or not he could tie his own shoes? I'm sorry?
I don't remember being asked that in
Okay. Would it refresh
this
your memory
room.
if I showed you it?
Oh, I believe that it was asked that. I'm not saying I wasn't. I don't remember being asked that in the courtroom, but I do remember that I was being asked. I was asked it at some point in time.
Okay. Do you remember being asked if he had any difficulty tying his own shoes, and you indicated that he did not have any difficulty tying his own shoes?
I think there was a series of questions that I was asked, can you do this, can you do this, and I answered yes to most of them, if
Okay,
not all.
and one of those was, can he tie his own shoes, and you
Sure.
answered yes.
Sure.
Okay.
And for the most part, like I said, he could.
Okay, but in that answer, what I'm saying is that you didn't say yes for the most part he could, he had difficulty, you said yes he could.
Sure. If you read that whole section in the deposition, then you will read that I gave a one-word answer to Mr. Martin's firing of questions to me.
Okay, well, okay, but you weren't limited in your answer, right?
No, I was not.
Okay, so when you say that he was firing these questions at you, he never said to you, I only want you to give a one-word answer.
Correct. He did
All right.
not say that.
So when you were asked the question, can he tie his own shoes, you weren't limited in your answer, you just chose to say yes.
Correct.
He could put on a belt,
As far as I know, yes.
and comb his hair.
As far as I know. Those are not things I have observed him doing.
Would he help bring in the groceries?
I believe he will, yes.
Go out to the car, bend down, grab the groceries, come back in, put them down.
They haven't.
Tell me to slow down, I'm trying to slow
I
down.
know, she told me the same thing earlier. Yes, they have an SUV now, and yes, they both carry in groceries, to my knowledge.
Okay. And I think you already indicated this. He didn't have any difficulty sitting in the car for a long period of time?
I don't think difficulties sitting in the car, but I think getting out after sitting for a long period of time was where the difficulty came in.
Okay, because if his back was so, it was hurting so much, that's why I'm asking you the question. It didn't hurt him to sit down for a long period of time, even though he had these back issues.
I don't know if it did or not. He didn't really complain about it.
Well, I think you indicated that you went on a trip to North Carolina, was that? Did you go on a trip to North Carolina with him in October of 2013?
Yes, we did.
Okay, and that's just a few months before the shooting, right?
Correct.
And where'd you go, Franklin or Highlands?
I don't remember that trip.
Okay.
I
Well,
think it
did you
was
not remember it at all, or you
probably-
just don't remember where you went?
I don't remember which one. I think the year before we had gone to Highlands. We were in Highlands. My ex-husband was with us, so my daughter was less than a year old. So that would have been the Franklin trip.
Okay. And from Brooksville to Franklin is about 8 hours?
I believe so, 8.5.
And the defendant drove those 8 hours, right?
To my knowledge, I wasn't with him, but yes, that's
Right,
what I
but-
believe.
But he and your mom went together, right?
Correct.
All right. And you learned then that he had driven the entire way?
I don't recall if he drove the entire way or if she did. It was likely, based on past history, that he drove the entire way. But for that particular trip, I don't remember if she drove at all or not.
Okay. What about when you were all together in Franklin? Who did the driving?
I think my dad or my brother was with us too. I don't know if he drove at all.
When you say he drove it all, who's he? He your brother or he?
I don't know if Matt drove at all because he was with us. If he's with us, sometimes he will drive as well. I don't recall on that particular trip if he did, so I would say probably predominantly my father.
And you rented a house, right?
Correct.
All right. And Matt and the defendant did a lot of fishing that trip.
I think I remember them bringing their fishing poles, and the house was on a river. I don't recall how much fishing they did.
Okay. Would it refresh your memory if I showed you your deposition?
Sure, or you can read it.
May I approach the witness?
Yes.
Counsel, I'm referring to page 13, lines 19 and 20. If you just read this to yourself and just tell me when you're finished. This would be 20 and 21.
Okay.
Okay, so that refresh your memory that your brother and the defendant did a lot of fishing on that trip.
That's what I said in my deposition, correct.
And also when you were out there, you went for half-day walks, shopping, hiking, things like that.
I don't remember doing any hiking that trip, and I had friends in the area, so I wasn't with them the whole time because I have friends that live up there, so my daughter and I visited them as well. I would say that we did, yes, I remembered going shopping. We usually did that on vacations, but I don't know that we did much hiking that trip.
Okay, and when you went shopping, it was just 5-6 hours you walk around the town?
Not so much.
Not so
no.
much what?
We're not 5 or 6 hour shoppers. We would go to town, go maybe 1 or 2 shops, and then we're done.
Okay. Would it be a half a day, or not even as much as a half a day then?
It would depend on if we went in the area or we were doing something in the area or we traveled. If we traveled to another area where there was a 30, 45-minute drive, then it might take a half a day that we were gone. But we're not the people that just go and shop all day when you're on vacation. We just enjoyed being outside.
So would you say that if you went shopping, it would be a half a day or not a half a day?
It could or could not be. I don't recall the exact time we were shopping on that trip. But did we go in some of the junk shops or visit some of the
Would it refresh
stores
your memory
in
if I
the
showed
area?
you your deposition?
Okay.
Okay, this is page 15, line 6.
Okay, it's the same thing I'm telling you now. Maybe a half a day.
Okay.
Could be. Maybe a half a day, maybe not.
A moment, Your Honor.
You may.
Okay, so you were talking about on direct biking, right? And again, we're talking about 2013 all the way up until the point in time of the shooting. Okay? And you indicated that that he would do some biking, right?
Correct.
All right, and he had two different types of bikes, right?
Correct.
A road bike with slick tires.
Yes.
Okay, and what's slick tires?
Just tires that are more of a smooth surface.
Okay, are they those really thin ones?
I don't know if his are or not because they make slick tires that are bigger now too. So I'm not certain what kind of tires.
Okay, did it have the lean-in grips? You know what I'm saying? So you sit on it and you got the grips and you're kind of leaning over.
Sure. I'm not sure. I know way back in the day he had a bike like that, but I know that he switched out bikes to suit his abilities at the time.
Okay, would it refresh your memory to take a look at your deposition?
That's fine. After 8 years, or however long ago that was, it's hard to remember what type of handlebars were on his bike.
Oh, I know, probably same way with all the witnesses.
Objection. Ask the court to strike that gratuitous comment.
Overruled.
Now, that road bike, he rode that several times a week, right, in 2013?
Did you want me to read something from my deposition?
It was about the lean-in handle grips. I mean, do you want to look at it?
If you'd like for me to.
I don't think it matters.
Okay.
Did he ride that bike several times a week?
To my knowledge, yes.
And he would ride on trails?
No, he rode on pavement.
Okay. Was the name of the trail, and I'm terrible with pronouncing this name, so it's going to be awful, but the Withlacoochee?
Withlacoochee Trail.
Yeah, I can never say it right, but
We've
he went
got-
riding on that one?
I believe so. There's several in Hernando County, but I think that's the one closest to their house, so I believe that's where he rode from most of the time.
Okay. Now, if he did that, he'd have to take the bike from the house, right?
Correct.
And then where would he put it? In the back of the SUV or on top?
No, not on top. He had a rack that went on the back, and he just stuck it on the rack.
Okay, so you have to pick the bike up, put it on the rack.
Correct.
Obviously, drive out to the trail, take it off.
Correct.
All right, and then just go on whatever bike ride he went, and then do the same thing to go back home.
Correct.
All right. I mean, I know it sounds like common sense, but again, we're just talking about his physical abilities in 2013 up to the point of the shooting. And he also would ride a mountain bike, right?
I believe he had one, yes.
Okay, but he would ride it.
I don't know which bikes he chose to ride at which times. I think that when he rode with my mother, he mostly rode the mountain bike. And when he rode with several of his friends, I think he mostly rode the road bike.
All right. Now, in April 2013, when you moved in, you talked about kayaking, right?
Correct.
All right. And he actually owned two different kayaks, right?
He owned two, and my brother owned two, correct.
Okay. And the reason I'd imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, that he owned the kayaks was because they did enough kayaking where it wouldn't be worth renting the kayak, right?
I don't know why he chose to buy them instead of rent.
Okay. Well, I mean, it would make sense, right? I mean, instead of spending $45 to rent a kayak, if
I'm
you're...
going to object. What's the relevancy of it makes sense?
Okay, I'll move on. He owned two kayaks, right?
Correct.
And they were single kayaks?
Correct.
And you went with them in April 2013?
Yes, I did.
And in 2013, when you went kayaking, you went on the Wikiwachi?
Correct.
All right. You would drive to where? Where would you load the kayaks up? Where the mermaid place was?
I think so. I think that's where it is. It's right next to it, not like in the park in
Right.
Wikiwachi Springs, but right next to it, yes.
Right. And then would you go down and then, I don't know, can you paddle back up and get out in the same spot where you went in?
No, they have a shuttle. They offer a shuttle service where when you get to your destination, they'll load your kayaks for you and drive them back. On that particular occasion, I don't recall if we used the shuttle service or if Matt brought his truck down there.
Okay, and down there, is that park that's all the way at the end? Is it? I can't remember
Rogers.
the name.
I
John
think it's
Rogers
Rogers Park.
Okay. Now for kayaking, you have to paddle, obviously, right?
Correct.
Uses your shoulders, your back,
Sure.
and it takes several hours, doesn't it, to go from the launch site all the way down to Rogers Park?
I think it probably does. I know that Dad always planned the kayaking trips that they did, so he always planned according to the current. So we didn't have to paddle upstream per se. So depending on where the current was, it would depend on how much time that it took.
Okay, well, didn't the current always go from where you launch down the John Rogers? It only goes one way.
Correct, but it depends on, it's different when the tides are coming in and out, it makes a difference with the current. So yes, he always looked at that and what was going on with the currents and what was going on with the time of day that we went. That made a difference.
Okay. Well, the current was never really, really swift, or it only take an hour, right?
I don't recall how much time it took us.
Okay.
That's the only time I've made that trip.
Okay, and you don't remember how long it took you?
I don't.
It wasn't like whitewater rafting, though, right?
No, not at all.
Okay. I mean, that's just not how Wiki Watchy is.
No.
All right, and these two kayaks that you own, you put them on a trailer, right?
Yes.
All right, and then the trailer was kept in the backyard on his property, right?
Correct.
And I guess based on what you're describing, did someone help him put that hitch onto the SUV, or did he do that himself?
I don't recall if Matt helped him do it that day or not. Could he do it himself? Yes. It was a little aluminum trailer. But that particular day, I don't know if Matt helped him load him, do all that or not.
I thought Matt met y'all there.
I don't know if he came by the house or he met us there. I don't remember that particular day.
All right, so you were talking about the paddles. You said they're two-piece paddles?
Correct.
So you, obviously, this is going to be kind of silly, but you have the two paddles and you just lock them together, right? And there's little pins and they snap and it's put together.
I think it's like a little spring lock.
Okay. And I remember when you started your testimony, you got really emotional because that's when you realized that, you know, your dad was in this really deteriorating condition, right? You remember that?
Correct.
Because these paddles, he couldn't take these paddles apart and he really needed your help, and that was a big moment for you, right?
When your father that's been able to do everything his entire life can't get two simple pieces of, I don't know if it's metal or what it was made out of, but when he can't get those apart, it's certainly eye-opening.
Wasn't it just stuck?
I don't think so. They went apart. He stored them apart all the time, so I don't know that it was just stuck.
Okay, well, I'm talking about this very particular point in time, right, when you got emotional on the stand. Wasn't the reason that the paddles couldn't come apart simply because they were stuck?
I don't think they were stuck. If they were stuck, we would not have been able to get them apart.
So you're saying it was stuck or wasn't stuck?
What's your definition of stuck?
Okay, was it coming apart very easily?
Clearly not, because one person couldn't do it.
Okay, and so in order to get this apart, what'd you have to do? Did the two of you have to work together to get this apart? Or did you just come and do it?
No, he asked for my help to do it.
Okay, so that means both of you together were able to take it apart.
Yes, sir. That's what I recall.
Okay, and it was stuck pretty good, wasn't it?
I don't remember. I remember him asking me, and I remember us both doing it together, but I don't recall.
Okay, so let's talk about how it came that you were able to take it apart with him. Did both of you have to tug on it?
I believe so. I mean, we obviously had to push the little button down and pull it apart.
Okay, so were both of you tugging and pulling and twisting to get this thing apart?
Possibly.
Okay, would it refresh your memory to take a look at your deposition?
Sure.
May I approach the witness?
You may.
Page 37. You go from lines 15 to 25. Just read to yourself. Let me know when you're finished.
Okay.
I was gonna have you read the second page, so you already finished reading it?
Just to like there.
Okay. Let me see if I need to look at anything else. Okay, did you stop at line 7?
That's what I stopped.
Okay, so talking about that incident, the way that you and the defendant were able to get that stuck paddle apart was that for 10 full minutes, the two of you are twisting, tugging, and pulling that thing.
I said about 10 minutes. I don't remember exactly how long it took us to get it apart, and I said yes, and there was probably more twisting involved than pulling, but both.
Okay, so my question to you is, I mean, you're the one that answered 10 minutes, right? You saw that?
About 10 minutes.
Okay. And I'm not holding you to 10 minutes, could be 9, could be 8. But basically, you know, the picture I thought you were painting was that he couldn't just undo it. But in reality, what it was is the paddles were stuck, so he asked your help, and then for 8, 9, or 10 minutes, the two of you are twisting this paddle to pull it apart, and finally together, because it was stuck, you were able to do it, right? That's really the picture of what happened.
Those same paddles he used every time he went kayaking, and that's the only time he couldn't get them apart himself, to my knowledge.
Okay, but the only reason I brought it up was you were so emotional over the fact you were realizing for the first time how your dad was deteriorating.
Yeah, because he asked his daughter for help.
Okay, to undo stuck paddles that he then could twist for 10 minutes.
I don't know what you're getting at.
I'll move on. All right, let's talk about the sporting clays. All right, so where would you go with the defendant to do the sporting clays?
Tampa Bay Sporting Clays.
All right, and in 2013, about how many times do you think you and him went?
Probably about 5 or 6 times.
Okay, and can you explain what it is when you go there and you shoot? Are they? I don't know. Okay. Are they birds? What is it that you shoot? What are they called?
It's called a clay pigeon, and it is a
Okay.
piece of clay that's like this big around, and it's slung into the air from a machine.
Okay, and when you do that, what type of firearm do you use?
I was using a Benelli Super Sport 12
Okay,
gauge
and
shotgun.
is that a shotgun?
A 12 gauge shotgun.
All right, and the defendant, when he would go on those 6 times in 2013, he would use a shotgun as well?
That same gun.
Okay, and how many rounds would you shoot when you went there?
Sometimes we wouldn't do the entire course. Sometimes, so never more than 50 rounds, because I believe the course was 50 rounds.
Okay, so, and they had 3 courses there, right?
Yes.
All right. So 50 rounds would mean that both you and he would have to load 50 shells, right?
Correct.
I mean, it sounds like an obvious question. When you load shells, can you just drop them in, or you got to apply some pressure into the springs to get them in there?
No, it's not difficult. You just kind of push it in with your thumb.
Okay, but there's a spring in there that you got to push it into, right?
I'm not sure how the mechanism, how it actually functions, but you do have to push it in. But it's not something that's hard to do.
Was that the first time you used that shotgun?
No, it is not.
Okay, so do you know what it takes to load, or you don't know what it takes to load?
Sure. I don't know the internal workings of the weapon, no, but
Okay.
I know how to load it, yes.
Okay, well, I'm not asking you, so no time I don't want you to think that I'm asking you the internal workings of the firearm. I'm not asking
You were asking me about the spring, and you don't visibly see a spring, so.
Okay, well, when you load it, don't you feel some pressure?
Not much, a little bit. That gun is super easy to use and super light.
Okay, well, when you're pushing it and you're feeling something push back, you don't think that's a spring?
It could be.
How long does it take to do the course?
It depends on how many people you're shooting with. It depends on if people in front of you are taking a long time and you have to wait on them. So it all depends.
Okay, let's say it's the best case scenario, about an hour?
I haven't shot since that time period, so sure, we'll say an hour.
Okay, well, I don't want to put any words in your mouth. Do you want to take a look at your deposition?
Did I say about an hour?
You did.
Okay.
All right, now the course, it's kind of, and we're talking about back in 2013, 2014, it wasn't pavement, right, where you'd walk around?
No, it's not.
All right, was it kind of just like a dirt trail, I guess?
Mostly dirt, just hard packed dirt because it was driven on as well.
Okay, and were there a lot of trees around?
Yes, you're
So-
walking in the woods.
Okay, so there's roots and things like that, you gotta walk over, step over, things like that.
Not so much on the trail because, like I said, they drive on it as well. So the trails were pretty much just hard packed dirt.
Okay, and although you could drive on it, the times you went, the two of you decided you just wanted to walk it,
Correct.
as opposed to taking the easy way, especially if you have some difficulties, some physical disabilities, of sitting in a cart and driving around. You just walked it instead.
We walked it.
All right, and there's some stations there where it requires stairs, right?
Correct.
All right, so you walk up and down the stairs, right?
Yes.
Now, the shotgun that you all were carrying, and I'm really talking about the defendant's shotgun, that wasn't one that you could break and put over your shoulder, correct?
Correct.
You'd have to just walk with it?
Yes.
All right, so, and again, I know it sounds like a silly question, but he's got to grip it with his hands.
Sure.
And when you're carrying something, obviously, there's going to be some strain on your shoulders.
Okay.
Well, yes or no?
The gun's so light. I mean, I can shoot 50 rounds and not feel it at all. So there are shotguns that are way heavier than that. Yes, I would say take more effort to carry them around.
Okay, and then for the ammunition, where was that held? Where did he hold the ammunition? In a pouch or in a vest?
I remember him wearing a vest. I always wore a pouch. I can't say that he didn't use both. I do remember him wearing a vest on occasion, but I don't remember if he was getting the ammo out of his vest or out of a pouch. And when I say pouch, I mean a pouch that snaps around your hips.
Right, around your belt?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any difference whether or not you carry it in the vest or in the pouch? I mean, is it more comfortable either way?
I've never carried it in a vest. I don't know. I've always used a pouch.
When you carried the ammunition, was it loose or was it in boxes?
You might have 2 small boxes and then maybe some loose. It depends. Everybody does it different. Some people dump them all out of the boxes. Some people carry boxes. Some people don't.
Okay, what about the defendant?
I don't recall.
You don't remember?
No.
All right, and then the actual mechanism of shooting, you go to the station, you know, whether you had to walk to it or you had to go upstairs, you get to the station, right? And then, so, you know, we'll say you or we'll say the defendant, because it's going to be the same way, right? The way that this is done. So what happens? You get up there, and what happens next?
You get up there, and then there's typically another person that's on your team. You say pull, they press the button for the mechanism, and then you fire.
Okay, so let's talk about what that entails, since we're talking about doing things physically. So the button's pushed. Where would he hold the shotgun as he's waiting for the button to be pushed?
I don't know if he held it at ready position or if he held it at down. You can shoot, there's different ways to shoot. Some people hold it at ready position, which is what I do. And then other people will hold it and then get ready once they call pull.
Okay, so pull, and what happens next? So do you have to pull the shotgun up real fast?
Well, it depends. If you're already at ready position and you say pull, then no, you just follow the shell and pull the trigger.
Okay, and what happens if it's not at ready position?
Then you would have to bring the gun up and follow the shell and pull the trigger.
Okay, and then once it goes off and it's going, you have to, I know it's going to sound silly, but you have to aim, and you're actually rotating your back and your shoulders as you're tracking it across the sky, right?
Correct.
All right, and then you pull the trigger,
Yes.
and you're holding the shotgun up, next to your face?
Yes.
All right.
Against your shoulder.
Okay, and you do that 50 times?
Yes. If you shoot that many that day, yes.
And then obviously after the shot, you got to open up the shotgun, take those shells out, load the other ones in, and that's what you do throughout the whole course, right?
Correct.
So you're basically using your fingers and your hands to do things about 100 times during a day like that.
I don't remember if those shells auto-ejected or not.
have a moment, Your Honor?
You may.
The week before the shooting in the theater, the defendant and your brother went on a week-long hunting trip?
I believe that was their trip to Ohio, yes.
Ohio?
I think so.
Okay, but it was a week-long hunting trip.
I don't remember the duration of the trip.
I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Redirect.
All right, the prosecutor talked to you a lot about, your father driving, for instance, okay? You know that you see him, he walks around with a cane, right? You know he uses a cane now to walk?
I do.
Does he have a handicap placard on his car?
No, he does not.
He still drive around?
Well, I mean, limited now at this point, but yes, he drives to the grocery store and doctor's office and where he's allowed to go.
But he could drive, if he were allowed, he could drive all over the place.
Yes, sir, I do believe so.
He still mows his yard on the ride-on mower.
Yes, he does.
In terms of, some of the questions the prosecutor asked you, he asked you about, about this shoelace thing. Well, the question that was proposed to you was, can he tie his shoes? And you answered yes.
Oh, and yes, he can.
If the question was asked of you, does he ever have difficulty tying his shoes, what would be your answer?
Exactly how I answered, that for the most part, yes, he can tie his shoes, but I have seen him have difficulty bending down to tie his shoes.
Okay. And the prosecutor is asking you, if you know about his head and all of that. I mean, would you agree or disagree with me that the last thing you would want to see your father in 2014 as a 71-year-old, last thing you would want to see is him get hit with anything, right?
Correct.
You know that if he got hit with a fist, it might kill somebody at his age, right?
Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
The door was open, Your Honor.
Oh, well.
And so you know that although he may have been able to walk around in the Carolinas, you know that whether or not he could go fishing or shoot clays, that as he sat in that movie theater as a 71-year-old, if he got hit, he could be seriously injured or killed, right?
Yes, sir.
May this witness be released?
We have her under subpoena. We asked that she be on standby.
All right. You're free to go, Ms. Shaw, but if you get called back, you have to come back.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
All right, let's take a 10-minute recess, and remember my instructions during the break, please.
All right, for 10 minutes.
We ready to get them in? And, oh, never fails. And who's your next witness?
Matthew Reeves.
Okay. Do you have any others past him for today? No? Okay, that's what I thought. All right. How are we looking for time for next week? You looking all right? I mean, we're gonna make it by the end of the week?
I think so. I can give you a very good idea by Monday, I think.
Okay.
Because I've spoken to all of our experts, all of our
Have-
questions.
Did you just tell me about Dr. Foley today?
Yeah, we just,
Yeah.
Karina?
Yeah.
What was the message on Dr. Foley?
Make sure you read it and put it on my computer.
Thank you, Deputy. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Were you all able to abide by my instructions during the recess?
Yes.
All right, then we will get started again. Mr. Michaels?
Defense calls Matthew Reeves.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give in this call shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Michaels.
Please state your name,
Matthew J. Reeves.
and how are you related to Curtis Reeves
He's my father.
and Vivian Reeves?
Yes, mother.
Tell me what you do for a living.
Work for the Tampa Police Department.
For how long now?
Next month will be 19 years.
What is your current assignment?
Currently assigned to patrol, and I'm also a member of the bomb squad.
And prior to that, were you in the military?
Yes, sir.
For how long?
6 years, U.S. Air Force.
And did you have any clearances?
Yes, sir. My duties required me to have a top secret SCI clearance.
And from what year to what year were you in the Air Force?
It would have been 1995 through 2001.
Now, we're going to talk about January 13th, 2014. Before we get there, let's talk about a hunting trip you went on with your father right before that, okay?
Yes, sir.
Tell me about that hunting trip. Where was it?
It would have been up in North Florida, Panhandle area.
And I don't hunt, so I'm going to ask you some questions about it. How does that go? Do you arrange to go there? How do you end up going to North Florida hunt? Or you just go there and turn off the road and walk into the woods?
This was a paid hunt that included a clubhouse for a location to stay. You're paying for a certain time frame, a couple days to hunt on their private property. So we basically had a house to stay in, and then we went out and found where we wanted to hunt within the property and hunted.
And were there other people staying in this house?
There was a couple other gentlemen, yes.
And so is this, when I think of a lodge, I think about, like in the movies, like a big log cabin with a big fire roaring and people in smoking jackets. Is that what it's like?
We were on cots in just a large open room.
Okay. And so this was in North Florida. Where was it in North Florida?
I don't recall the town.
Okay. And so what was the time period you paid for?
A few days, can't recall how many exactly.
And tell me, what are you hunting for?
Either deer or hogs.
And so how do you go about doing that? Do you shoot them? Do you use a bow and arrow? What were you using to hunt then?
This was we were only hunting archery in this trip.
All right, archery, that means bow and arrow?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so you went with your father?
Yes.
Did you all drive up there?
Yes.
Who drove?
I did.
Okay. And so tell me a little bit about the preparation for the trip. It's archery, so tell me about your father. Did he use a bow at that time?
Yes, sir.
And what sort of bow did he use at the time?
He had both a recurve, which is traditional, and he also had a compound bow.
And what's a recurve bow?
A recurve has no wheels on the ends of it. It's more of a traditional, there's no sights on the bow or anything.
Like in the movies Robin Hood?
Yes, sir.
A big bow like that?
Yes.
And what's the other bow? Compound? What is
Compound bow. It drops the poundage as you draw it back. So as you draw back, the poundage would be a let off of a certain percentage of what the overall weight of the pull would be.
What? I'm not sure I understand what that means. Let me ask you, does that mean it's easier to use than the first bow you talked about?
It has sights, and it's the equivalent of, say, a 50% let-off compound bow would be a 50-pound bow. Once you pull it back, you're only holding back 25 pounds instead of the full 50 pounds.
All right. So once you pull it back in terms of holding, I know it's not called a string. What is that called?
Well, the string, yes.
Oh, it is, okay. So you're holding back that part of the bow where you put the arrow into, right, to aim?
Yes, sir.
At your target.
Yes.
And so when you're holding it, it's a little easier to hold on that compound bow than the other one.
Yes, sir.
And so in this particular hunting trip, what sort of bow did your father use?
He was using a Matthews compound bow.
And what is the significance of that Matthews compound bow?
I had previously set the bow up for him. It was a newer bow that he had purchased. And when I set it up at a lot lower weight than his previous bow.
All right. And so that means it would be easier to pull back?
Yes, sir.
And easier to hold once it is back?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, leading up to the trip, do you practice? What do you do to prepare for the trip besides packing?
We generally tried to practice multiple times a week leading up to a trip like that.
And practice means shooting arrows?
Yes.
And where do you practice for this?
Either his backyard or my backyard.
Right. And how do you go about practicing?
We have targets, and we would essentially shoot anywhere from a few dozen arrows into those targets at different ranges.
Okay, and what do the targets look like? They look like animals, or are they sacks? What are
Bags or like a block.
they? Okay. Now, leading up to this trip, did you and your dad practice? In other words, shoot arrows in the backyard?
Occasionally. He'd practice on his own a lot of times, and I would practice on my own a lot.
But did you practice with him sometimes?
Yes.
Now, when you practice with him, how many arrows would he shoot at a time?
When we were getting ready for the trip, he wouldn't shoot more than maybe a dozen.
Okay. And before that, did he shoot more at a time?
We used to shoot a couple dozen arrows at a time in practice.
Okay. Do you think that sometimes he only shot maybe 2 or 3 at a time?
As we came closer to the trip, yes.
Okay. And so tell me about that. Was he unable, or tell me why he only would shoot 2 or 3, if you know?
Leading up to the trip, he contacted me about finding out the legality of him using a crossbow.
All right, let's talk about that for a second. A crossbow is, again, I can only go by the movies. Is it one of those things that it looks like a little rifle with a bow on top?
Yes, sir.
All right, and so that's one that you load up and you just pull the trigger,
Yes, sir.
and then the arrow goes.
Yes.
All right. And so you looked into that. Would you agree with me? Because it was a lot easier to use than the compound bow?
Yes, sir.
And so you did that at your father's request?
Yes.
Now, let me ask you about the trip itself. So you drive up there. Tell me what happens once you drive up there. Do you wake up early the next morning? Do you go out that night? Or are you allowed to hunt at night? I mean, I don't know.
We can't hunt at night. I don't recall what we did on the very first day, but it would have been scouting basically to scout out a place to hunt on the first available time we had.
All right. Tell me what that means, scouting.
We'll go look into an area and just see if we see signs for a deer. Basically like a little short day hike, walk into the woods, get a look around, find an area that we deem where we would like to sit.
Okay. Now, I know the prosecutor's going to ask you, so let me ask you ahead of time, how far do you walk into the woods with your father?
Maybe 100 yards.
All right. So you're not out there like a half a day or something like that?
No, sir. There were roads throughout the property.
I'm sorry?
There were roads throughout the property.
And so are you describing that you could get in your truck and drive up the road, pick a spot, and then walk into the woods 100 yards?
Yes, sir.
And that's how you would look for a place?
Yes, sir.
And when you say you look for a place, I imagine, again, I'm not a hunter, I guess you look for like animal scat, I guess they call it, right? That sort of thing, or?
With deer, you're usually looking for tracks, what's called a scrape and what's called a rub, and trails.
All right. So you're looking at the ground and looking at the trees to see if deer had passed there, that sort of thing.
Yes, sir.
Now, how do you hunt? I know Mr. Martin knows about, stalking, this and that, and I heard that term. So,
I have an objection to the gratuitous comments regarding counsel and also its continuing leading. I've let it go a little bit to get the flow going, but we need to have correct questions.
All right, let's curb the leading, sustained as to the leading.
let me ask you this: Are there several ways to hunt during that trip?
Primarily ways to hunt. Whitetail, especially in Florida, is going to be either sitting in a blind
All
or
right,
in
let me
a
talk about that.
tree stand.
Sitting in a blind, that's one way, right?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, is that one way?
Yes.
Tell me what that means, sitting in a blind.
You can either carry out what looks like a tent that has windows, set that up, and then you just sit in a chair inside it.
All right.
You
And
can-
so you're sitting there waiting for a deer to pass.
Yes, sir.
That's a blind. What's another way of hunting?
You also could make up a blind out of just brush, like down limbs and tree limbs and stuff, and just sit up in there wearing camouflage.
Okay. Again, waiting for a deer to pass?
Yes, sir.
What's another way?
A tree stand.
Okay. Now, how does a tree stand work?
We use a climbing stand, and you're climbing up into a tree to get an elevated position.
When you say climbing the tree, I'm imagining that you're putting spikes on your feet like a lineman on the telephone pole and lifting yourself up. Tell me, is that how it works?
No, sir.
How does it work?
The way we use is what's called a climbing tree stand. It has two pieces, and once they're attached to the tree, you can Once you get into the stand and you put a safety harness on the tree, you move like an inchworm, kind of. You stand up, and then you just sit down, and it'll move up maybe an inch or a couple inches at a time.
Okay, so the way I understand it is, if this is the tree, there are two pieces to this tree stand.
Yes, sir.
They both go around the tree.
Yes.
One piece is here where you would sit. Is
Yes.
that right?
Yes, sir.
And then the other piece is is on the ground that your feet go into?
Yes.
All right. And so do you sit down then on the piece that's here by the back of your legs?
Yes.
And then you just inch I can't do both legs, I'll fall down, but if you inch them both up like this?
Yes.
Okay, and then it catches onto the tree, does it?
Yes, sir.
And then you stand up, and now you're up a little higher.
Yes.
Okay, and so you do that, like you said, like an inchworm until you get to whatever height you want.
Yes, sir.
What other ways were your options to hunt on that particular trip?
Those are the only two ways we hunted on that trip.
All right. Now, tell me about your dad. You've already told us that he's using a bow that's easier to use. Did I have that right?
Yes, sir.
And do I also have right that you've adjusted it so it would make it even easier
Your
to
Honor,
use?
I'm going to object to the rehashing of the testimony.
Your Honor, in order to put it into context, I think
It's a
state calls
summary
it
of the
looping.
testimony, just it's not appropriate.
All right, I'll overrule, but be mindful, please.
Okay. And so, you have the bow. How does your father hunt on that particular trip? In other words, is it blind or tree stand, or both?
He only hunted in the tree stand one time. Every other time was out of a blind.
All right, let's talk about that. So on that trip, which was right before January 13th of 2014, is it true that your father got up in a tree stand?
One time, yes.
All right. Now, did he go up the way you described on one of those tree stands, inch by inch?
Yes, sir.
Now, I guess because your feet have to lift the bottom part up, is that bottom piece heavy?
The whole stand, both pieces together, are only 18 to 19 pounds.
And that's the part you sit on as well as the other part together?
Yes, sir.
And so your father used the tree stand. How high up did he go into the tree?
The tree that I placed the stand on could only go about 10 feet up due to he only went about 10 feet off the ground. He was unable to go any higher.
And when you say unable, was that because of the tree?
He only did it the one day, but he was unable to go very high as it was anyways.
And that's because he just couldn't do it?
I don't know.
Okay. I imagine you've been hunting with your dad since you were a little boy.
Yes, sir.
I imagine you've seen your father go up into a tree stand many times since you were a little boy.
Yes, sir.
Is 10 feet the usual height he would hunt at?
No, sir.
How high up would he go when he was younger?
We both would generally go up anywhere from 20 to 30 feet up.
Now let's talk about the other way. You said there's a blind.
Yes, sir.
In this, at that last hunting trip, what sort of blind was it?
It kind of like a tent that pops open.
And who carried that into the woods?
I carried it into the woods.
Now, when you hunted, for instance, when your dad was on the tree stand, how far were you from the road?
Within 100 yards.
And so, is it that you drive your truck from the camp or the lodge to the area that you're going to walk into the woods?
Yes, sir.
Is that what you did?
Yes.
And when you hunted on the blind, did your father carry the blind into the woods?
I carried it.
And why did you carry it?
To help him out. He was carrying his bow. I carried the blind.
All right. In the past, when you were younger, did your dad carry the blind into the woods himself?
He would have carried all his own equipment.
Now, during that trip, did your father, I guess the terminology is harvest, did he kill anything?
No, sir.
Okay. And did you?
Yes, sir.
A deer?
Yes.
Now tell me about that. I'm imagining that if you harvest a deer in the woods that now somehow you have to get it back out to your truck. Do I have that right?
Yes, sir.
Do you have some kind of cart or something you pull it on?
No, sir.
You have to drag it out.
A drag.
And when you harvested your deer, did you drag him out of the woods?
Yes.
Did your father help you?
No, sir.
Have you seen him in the past be able to do that?
The last time that he had killed a deer, he drug it out and hurt himself.
And how long ago was that before this trip?
Probably 5-6 years before this trip.
And since then, have you always helped him
Yes.
take a deer out of the woods?
Yes.
Now let's talk a little bit about January 13th of 2014, okay? Did you have plans with your mom and dad to go see a matinee that day?
Not prior to the day of.
So tell me, how are the plans made?
They contacted me, I don't remember, by text or phone, and asked if I wanted to attend the Lone Survivor movie with them.
Okay, and was that something you were interested in, going with your mom and dad to watch a matinee,
Yes.
to see that movie?
Yes, I've read the book.
Okay, and so now, as you decide to go, what are the plans? You're going to go with them?
I'll meet them there.
Okay. And what were you doing that you couldn't go with them?
I was cleaning up my truck from the hunting trip and also getting, just since we had been gone for a week, and getting my outside work done at my house.
If you're gone, if it's only a couple days trip, how are you gone for a week?
I can't recall the exact time frame, but being gone, it's just me that lives at my house, so there was chores that needed to be done.
All right, so your recollection is either a couple days or a week. Do I have that right?
Yes, sir.
Now, when you get back home, you are plans to meet your mom and dad at the theater. What happens then? You wash your truck. Do you actually go over to the theater?
Yes, I drove there.
Okay. Now, when you drive to the theater, are your parents already there? Do you know?
I was running late.
Oh. So the plan was to meet them there?
Yes, sir.
At what time?
I don't recall the exact time of the movie.
Was it sometime before the movie was to start?
It was just, I knew what time it was starting, and it was supposed to be there at that time.
Now, did your mom or dad tell you where they were going to be sitting, I mean?
I didn't know anything leading up to it because I had already turned my phone on silent and things because I was running late, so I'd already put it on silent, so I didn't know where they were at. I didn't learn that till afterwards that I'd received a text.
All right. And
later in the day.
Okay, I understand. So going there and actually getting to the theater, you didn't look at your phone, agree with me or not, to know that they had texted you to tell you where they were sitting?
Yes, sir, I never looked at it.
And so, if I may, Your Honor, I'd like to get the State's Exhibit number 5. May I approach the clerk?
Yes.
May I approach Matthew Reeves, please?
You may.
Showing you something that's been marked and accepted into evidence as a State's Exhibit 5. Do you recognize that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And is that an accurate depiction of what you remember?
Yes, sir.
Now, you, I guess, to get in the theater, you had to buy your ticket.
Yes.
So did you buy a ticket?
Yes, sir.
And where did you go once you bought your ticket at the ticket booth in front?
Straight into the theater.
So no concession stands or anything else?
No, sir.
And so, Your Honor, may I have the witness step down so we can show the exhibit, maybe help him better explain?
Sure.
Step down, please.
May I step over by the veil?
You may. Go ahead. I'm going to stay here. I can.
You've seen the photo.
I have.
I know, Your Honor. Please, Mr. Reed. All right. That was kind of a small picture. So, tell me, when you walk in the theater, this is theater number 10. Does it look like theater number 10 to you?
Yes, sir.
The same theater you walked into that day?
Yes, sir.
Tell me where you would come in. There looks like some stairs. Would you agree with me there?
Yes, if facing this, over here on the left side, it comes in below a wall. You're coming in at the bottom, coming in on this left side and around the corner, and then onto the stairs leading up.
All right. So do you agree with me, when you walk into those doors that say theater number 10, you're kind of going down a ramp?
Yes, sir.
And then when you turn the corner, you go actually into the theater and go up the stairs?
Yes, you're at the bottom, down just off of this picture.
All right. Now, when you get into the theater itself, what is going on in the theater? Are there previews playing?
Yes,
Tell me what the lighting conditions were like in that theater.
nearly pitch black.
Now, when you say nearly pitch black, could you see, for instance, people within a few feet of you?
Yes, sir.
Did you look around the theater to see where your mom and dad were?
Yes.
And could you see them?
No.
Where were you approximately when you turned around to look?
When I came around the end of the wall at the bottom here, I took one step up and was looking to see where they might be, but I was unable to see due to the lighting.
And when you got there, soon after, did the preview start to play, or were they playing when you got there?
One started to come on as I started looking for them.
All right. And so what did you do once that preview came on?
Most of the people in the theater were paying attention to the preview. I didn't want to interrupt, and I was interested in the preview. It was for the remake of the RoboCop movie, so I turned and faced the screen and watched the preview.
Okay, and can you see where you were approximately?
I would have been off of this picture on the right around the base of the steps or the first step up.
So you'd be more towards the front of the theater than this shows,
Yes, sir.
than where the steps show here.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so the previews play, they're playing, you're watching them. Do you hear anything unusual?
Not till after the preview is
We're
over.
going to talk about that. And so after the preview is over with, what do you do?
I turned back up. It got extremely dark because the screen went dark again. At that point, I turned and took my attention back to trying to find my parents.
And so did you turn around on the stairs?
Yes, sir.
And did you look into the theater?
Yeah,
What did you
and
do?
object leading.
I said, did you? It calls for a yes or no answer, Your Honor.
I didn't
Yes.
hear that, so overruled if that was the
So
case.
did you look at the theater to see if you could see where you were
Yes.
at? And did you see them at that time?
No.
And again, were you all the way down or were you moving up?
I took like 2 steps up.
And now at some point, do you hear something?
Yes.
Tell me what it is that you hear.
I heard my dad say something to the extent of, "Get out of my face" or "Get off of me."
Okay, let's talk about that for a second. Number one, when you heard that, was that in between the previews?
Yes.
So the second preview hadn't started yet, do you agree with that?
Yes, sir.
Now, when you heard that, how did you recognize the voice?
It's my father. I've known his voice my whole life.
And when you heard it, what was the tone of the voice?
It's alarming.
Did it alarm you?
Yes.
Could you tell where the voice was coming from on this photo, generally speaking?
Somewhere up in the back section in the middle.
Okay. Could you tell which row it was?
No, sir.
When you heard your father's voice cry out, did you turn to look?
Yes.
All right. And what area did you look in?
Up into the middle back section.
Now, at that point, were the previews playing or were they still off?
They were off.
And what were the lighting conditions?
At that point, it was nearly pitch black still.
Now, when you looked back into the back row, did you see anything?
Initially, no.
Okay, so did you see anybody standing, for instance?
Not at the initial, when I initially looked, I couldn't, it was too dark.
That's what we're talking about now. Now, at some point, do you start moving towards that voice?
Yes.
When do you do that?
I had started stepping up the steps while looking up into the back area.
When you heard the voice, you said it alarmed you. Did that cause you now to go towards where you heard it or not?
I had worked my way up the stairs. This was all happening at the same time when I heard it.
Okay. And so what's the next thing that happens?
The gunshot, and I see the flash and the silhouette of a person standing.
Now let's talk about that. When you heard the gunshot, you said you saw the flash. So which direction were you facing?
I was facing up towards the back.
Now when you said you heard the gunshot, did you also see a flash?
Yes, not the muzzle flash, but just the residual flash.
And what does that mean?
A muzzle flash would have a very distinct, bright burning. You would see an actual flame. I was just seeing a general flash.
And was there something that was blocking perhaps your view of seeing that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and what did you see?
A person standing.
Could you tell who that was?
At the time, no.
Did it appear to be a silhouette to you?
Yes.
Okay, you couldn't really make out any features, is that fair to say?
Yes, sir.
Now, what happens once you hear the gunshot? May I have the witness return to stand?
Yes.
Please sit down. What happens once you see this residual flash? It sounds like a light. Is that what that means?
Yes, sir.
And you hear the gunshot. You recognize it as a gunshot?
Yes, sir.
And that's because of your training, is it?
Yes, sir.
And your experience with firearms, is that true?
Yes, sir.
Now, once you hear and see that, what's the next thing that you see? You've described to me a silhouette, just so we know where we're at here. This residual flash, what's the very next thing you observe with your eyes?
The subject that was standing turned and took a large exaggerated step down.
And when you see that, are you closer to the back than what you showed me previously?
I was working my way up the stairs at that time.
Now, when you heard a gunshot, now you see an individual. That individual later became known to you as Mr. Oulson, is that true?
Yes, sir.
Now, once you hear that and you see that, what is it that you do? Do you go to your father or do you do something else?
No, I went to Mr. Oulson.
Okay, tell me about that. Do you go up the stairs?
I went up the stairs to the aisle that he was standing in.
And is it fair to say that that you don't remember if it was the second or the third row that you went to?
No, sir, I don't recall.
Okay. But you know it was up towards the top.
Yes.
Now, when you got there, tell me about your contact. Were you the first one to put your hands to get to Mr. Oulson?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And why did you do that? Why did you go to Mr. Oulson?
I was able to put the scene together in my training and other things. I knew what had occurred due to the series of things that I heard. So at that point, I went straight to Mr. Oulson.
And when we say you knew what occurred based on your training, are you talking about A, you heard a gunshot,
Yes.
and then B, you saw a silhouette that was standing, now not standing? Do you agree with that or no?
Well, they were still standing at that time.
But they were moving away.
Yes, sir.
And so for that reason, you wanted to check on the person that was a silhouette that you later found out was Mr. Oulson to try to help them if they were actually shot.
Yes, sir.
So what happens when you get up there?
As Mr. Oulson started to slump over, I had already assessed kind of the scene of what was going on.
Tell me about that. What did you assess?
One, I'm making sure that somebody doesn't have a weapon, so that it's safe to actually go hands-on. As he started to slump over, I grabbed onto both of his wrists.
Okay, you wanted to make sure that Mr. Oulson didn't have a weapon? Agree or disagree? You wanted to see whether Mr. Oulson had a weapon? Do you agree with that?
Initially, yes.
Okay. And so then you said, did you not, yes or no, that you put your hands on Mr. Oulson?
Yes.
Now, what did you do at that point?
I ordered somebody in the aisle to help me place him on the ground.
Okay, and did somebody help you do that?
Yes.
Once Mr. Oulson was on the ground, is he on the ground in kind of the rows between the seats?
Yes, sir.
So is he towards the aisle or not quite there yet?
His head was away from the aisle.
But he wasn't in the aisle where the stairways are?
No, sir.
Okay. And so what happens now once you get there? Do you try to render first aid to Mr. Oulson?
Yes.
Tell me what you do.
I immediately lifted the shirt up that he was wearing, pushed the shirt up to see where he was wounded. Once I saw a bullet hole, or what I knew to be a bullet hole in his left chest, I used the same shirt that I had lifted up to kind of like ball it up over the wound and then place direct pressure on it. Then I started speaking to Mr. Oulson.
Now, before that happened, after you heard the shot, Did you hear your dad say anything else?
No, sir.
You're there with Mr. Oulson and you're applying, it sounds like, just yes or no, were you applying pressure to the wound? Is that what you were doing?
Yes, sir.
And why were you doing that?
To try to limit the bleeding.
Do you have training in first aid?
Yes, sir.
And so what happens next? You're there rendering aid, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And what do you do?
I was just speaking to Mr. Oulson, trying to keep him looking at me, and stated, keep breathing, look at me, you're going to be okay. I continued to talk to him.
And did you apply any sort of chest compression, CPR, any of that sort of thing?
No, sir, he was still breathing.
And so at some point, do you leave Mr. Oulson?
Someone handed me either a shirt or a sweatshirt or something, and I used that to place over the wound. Then somebody notified me that there was a nurse present. And then not until the person who stated they were a nurse did I move out of my position and let them get to him.
So when you left Mr. Oulson, where did you go?
I went up to the aisle that my parents were in.
And at that time, could you see your father
Yes,
and your mother?
yes.
And why is that? Were the lights different? Or tell me how it was you can see them now and you couldn't see them before.
I was much closer, and the ambient lighting within the theater had started to come back on.
Okay. And ambient lighting, what do you mean by that?
Something was on the screen.
Now, once you get to the row your parents are going down the row, who do you come to first, your mom or your dad?
It would have been my mother first.
And was she sitting right next to your dad?
I don't believe so.
Agree or disagree that she was, maybe 2 or 3 seats away?
Somewhere in that general area.
And so what do you do first? You get to the area where your parents are. Who do you go to first?
I went to my father.
Now tell me what was going on with your father. Did you look at him?
My initial thing was to secure the firearm, so I asked him where the gun was.
And where was the gun?
He just stated that he stated a deputy, off-duty deputy, that was standing next to him.
Did your father tell you anything else?
I don't recall.
Sustained.
Now, when your father was sitting there, did you observe his face and his head?
Not directly. I saw that he had his hand on his face.
When you say hand on his face, are you talking about his face, his cheek, or somewhere on his face?
I can't recall the exacts. It was either on his cheek, on his face, and I'm not sure exactly.
And do you remember which hand?
No, sir.
And was he holding his face?
Kind of his cheek, his face, and that it seemed. I don't know how to describe it, and I don't recall which hand it was exactly.
Now, your father wore glasses back then? Did
Yes,
he?
sir.
All right. And did you notice his glasses? Were they straight on his head or not?
No, sir.
How were they?
One of the lenses would have been out of alignment from where you could actually see through it.
And what do you mean by that?
They were sitting crooked on his face.
So that one of the lenses wasn't covering one of his eyes? Is that what you're describing?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember which side was up or down?
No, sir.
Now, at that point, you're dealing with your father. You've looked at him. Do you do anything else in terms of your father at that point?
No, sir.
Do you say anything else to your father at that point?
I think the only thing I stated to them is I needed to go get cleaned up, then to get my mom out of the theater.
Now, let's talk about that. Cleaned up? Why did you have to get cleaned up?
I had a lot of blood on my hands.
From your rescue attempt?
Yes, sir.
And so, after you go and get cleaned up first, or do you take your mother out of there?
I actually went out to go get cleaned up first.
Okay. And then what do you do next? Come back in the theater?
Yes, sir.
And what do you do once you get back in the theater?
I get my mother and take her out.
Now, when you finally reached your mother, was she crying?
She was in shock.
Okay. You don't remember if she was crying or not?
Not initially.
Okay. And then where did you take your mother?
Into the lobby area.
Now, the lobby area, that's what, outside of the Theater 10 area you're talking about?
Yes, sir, it had been between Theater 10 and the concession stands.
Now, what's going on in that lobby area when you take your mom out?
Initially, I saw deputies responding in.
Okay. Once the deputies responded, do you have any contact with the deputies yourself?
I did state to him I was an off-duty officer and that the firearm was secure with a law enforcement officer inside the theater.
Now, when you were with your mother in the lobby, were there other people that were within the theater that were out in the lobby?
People that had been in the same theater with us, yes.
And were there tables? Describe what it's like out there.
They're small round table. I believe they're small tables.
Now, at some point, did you see, you're a police officer, so you know what this is, witness forms.
Yes, sir.
Did you see those forms being handed out to the individuals that were in the lobby?
Yes, sir.
Now, I know you were caring for your mother. Did you hear people that were congregating in the lobby discussing what they thought had happened in the movie theater?
We were initially trying to sit at one of the small tables, and when people sat down with their forms and were discussing it, I told my mother we needed to move.
Okay. But did you overhear that?
Yes, they were discussing the incident.
Now, is it fair to say, agree or disagree, you actually heard people saying something to the effect of, this was over popcorn?
Yes, sir.
Now, at that point, was your mother crying?
Yes.
Was she shaking?
Yes, sir.
Once the forms were handed out to the other people, you described that you moved your mother away. What's the next thing that happened? Did the police interview your mother?
They took us to another room, away from the rest of the people.
And were you both in the same room?
Initially, we were both seated in the same room, yes.
Now, at some point, do you get separated?
Yes,
And why is that?
for separate interviews.
So who gets interviewed first, your mother or you?
I don't recall.
Now, when your mother gave her interview, you were not present for that.
No, sir.
When you gave your interview, was your mother present for that?
I don't believe so.
Now, when you give your interview, tell me about that. Do you draw any kind of diagram? Do you try to provide aid? Tell me about your interview.
I provided a statement to what I observed, and they asked me to draw a diagram of where I was at and where I thought Mr. Oulson was at, and I drew a diagram on a piece of paper.
And once you gave that interview, what's the next thing that happened? Me and my mother stayed there while they were conducting their investigation until we were released. All right. And so then you don't have any other observations? There's nothing else that happened at the theater that day?
The only other thing that was a little bit strange to me, which they stopped, was initially they were going to tow my mother's car, and when I spoke to the detective, he changed that. They did not tow her car.
And so did you take your mother home?
Yes, sir.
Okay. May I have a moment, Judge?
You may.
May I approach the clerk?
You may.
Nothing further, thank you.
Thank you. Cross?
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
I'm going to discuss your direct examination that you just gave. I'm going to go kind of topic by topic. May not be in the order that you discussed it with Mr. Michaels. So in fairness to you, I'll tell you what topic we're going to talk about, then you'll know where we're at, all right?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to begin with the last topic that Mr. Michael discussed with you about when you went out into the lobby and you saw two people sitting at the table and they were, you said, discussing what?
The incident.
What did they say?
Something about popcorn.
Something about popcorn. All right. Let me ask you this. You would agree with me that when you go to a football game, maybe 50,000 people all around the stadium. And you remember Doug Flutie's pass, the miracle pass, that it just went all the way down and the guy caught it in the end zone? Remember
No,
that?
sir.
Before your time? Good grief, I just aged myself. Okay, let me talk about something else then. You're at the football game and you see a kickoff, and then there's a kickoff return from yard number 1 all the way down to the end. Okay? Would you agree with me that the people inside the stadium all had an opportunity to see the run from one end to the other?
Yes,
Do you
sir.
agree with that? Would you agree?
That's in a lit stadium, but yes, in a stadium
During the
they would.
day, Tampa Bay Stadium, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it's hot, everyone's looking, watching the game. Here this guy runs 100 yards all the way down. Everyone's watching that event. You would agree, because that's something that just doesn't happen all the time, right?
It doesn't fit the context.
What doesn't?
If you're trying to liken this to what occurred in the theater, no.
Answer my question.
In a football stadium, yes.
In a football stadium, if one person received the kickoff and he went 100 yards all the way down, that would be something that doesn't happen all the time, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right? And the people, because it doesn't happen all the time, they would be watching that event as it took place. You would agree with that, right?
Yes.
And all of them would have an opportunity to see that event, correct?
Yes.
All right. Now, the people are leaving the football stadium, and 2 people are talking, hey, did you see that guy run 100 yards? Yeah, I saw the guy run 100 yards. If they both had the opportunity to see it, would you discount that the fact that they actually saw it just because they were talking about it?
Not in a football stadium.
My question is, would you discount the fact that they both said, I saw the guy run from one end to the other just because they were talking about it?
No, not in a
All right.
stadium.
We're going to talk about January 13th, 2014. Now, you showed up casually dressed, correct?
Yes, sir.
Kind of a polo shirt, kind of loose fitting that you wore out, so it was kind of around your pockets. Remember that?
I'm not sure what I had on.
A light color shirt with stripes across. You have a shirt like that, right?
I might have back then.
Yeah.
If you say I did, I haven't seen a picture of me wearing
All right.
it, but I'm sure
Now-
I probably did.
You indicated to us that you approached Mr. Oulson, you applied your hands to his chest, you got blood on your hands, right?
Yes, sir.
Then after you performed that, you went up to where your mom and dad were, you had a brief conversation, then you left.
Yes,
Remember
sir.
that? And because you had to clean up, right?
Yes.
And you remember when you turned to go and leave, you wouldn't get blood on anyone. You kind of left like this, so you wouldn't get blood on anybody else, right? You remember that?
I don't recall.
You saying it didn't happen, or you just don't recall?
I don't recall.
At the time that you're at the bottom of the stairs and the previews are going, you're telling us that it was near pitch black. Remember that testimony?
Yes, sir.
Right. And then when you looked up to see where your folks were, it was pitch black and you couldn't see where your mom and dad were. Remember that?
Yes, before the preview started.
Right. Then during the direct examination, you indicated to Mr. Michaels, did you not, that when the previews came on, you looked around and saw that everybody else was paying attention to the previews just like you were. You remember that testimony?
I didn't want to interrupt people. Yes, sir.
When you looked back and you saw people watching the theater, you said they were watching, and then you turned around to watch just like they were. You remember that testimony?
Yes, sir.
All right, so you could see those people. You could see their faces, could you not?
People around me, yes.
Now, let's talk about your contact with Mr. Oulson. You said something that really, really struck home. I want to discuss it with you. When you went up there and you came up to Mr. Oulson, you began to place hands on him, and you said you ordered people to place him on the ground. Those were your words, correct?
Before I was on the floor.
You ordered people to place him on the ground. That's what you told us.
Yes, sir.
All right? So at that point, you went into police mode, did you not?
Yes, I didn't want him to fall.
Right? And you ordered people to do it. You expected them to carry out your order, didn't you?
One person. Yes.
You expected them to carry out your order, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
And that's what police officers expect, whether they're on duty or off duty. If you order someone to do it, you expect them to do it. And that's what your mindset at the time.
Regulation is improper.
Overruled.
Judge, can we object? Can we
Sure.
approach?
Let's talk about the hunting trip. That was a week before January 13th. 13th was a Monday, January 13th. So there was a weekend the week before. That's when the hunting trip was?
I don't recall the exact dates of the trip.
Was it within a week of the incident?
Yes, sir.
Because you indicated that you were home washing up your truck from the hunting trip when you got the call to go to the movies. That's
Yes,
what I was
sir.
asking.
Yes.
All right. So you recall now the hunting trip was at least a week before?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let's talk about that. Mr. Michaels asked you about going out into the woods. You drove down I'll call it a service road, Forest Service road, a dirt road, right?
Yes, sir.
And then you would park.
Yes.
Then you would walk into the woods.
Yes.
Now, in North Florida, the sand's kind of like sugar sand, isn't it?
The area we were hunting was not sugar sand.
All right, what was it?
It was just dirt.
Dirt? Any clay down, red clay like we see in Georgia?
Not in Georgia, no. This was
So
just
dirt.
muddy. Yeah, a little bit of clay, but not the red clay.
All right. What kind of foliage was it? Is it pine trees up there, oak trees?
It's a mix of everything.
Well, what is the mix of everything?
Pines and oaks.
Okay, so pines and oaks. Pine needles on the ground,
I'm sure there were.
oak leaves on the ground.
Yes, sir.
It's in December, right?
Beginning of January, yes.
Okay, kind of winter when leaves start to fall off trees, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, in that area, you have to navigate because there is no trail. You just pick your own trail, right?
The property we were hunting on actually had a lot of little roads you couldn't even drive on, so you could walk in.
Single track or double track?
Some were double trapped, some were single.
All right. And you would walk in the dirt part?
Yes, sir.
And then, but you don't hunt from those tracks. You get out into the woods so the deer can't see you, right?
When you go down some of those tracks actually are good spots to hunt.
All right, so you would set up your blind and put your chair right on one of those tracks?
Sometimes, yes.
Okay. Now, let's talk about this tree stand. It's a climbing tree stand. It's a climbing sit stand, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. It's 2 pieces,
Yes.
approximately 18, 19 pounds.
Yes, sir.
Now, Mr. Michaels talked to you a little bit about it. There's a section that's for your feet,
Yes, sir.
and there's a platform for your feet.
Yes,
right?
sir.
There's Velcro straps that you put your toes in, right?
A form of straps, yes.
Yeah, some form of straps. Then it comes out and circles a little bit with little teeth so you grab into the tree, right?
Yes, sir.
Then there's the cable that you have to go around the tree and hook to it, right?
Yes, sir.
Then the second part is where you actually put your bottom and you use your arms, right? This is kind of the same thing. There's
Yes,
a
sir.
strap that goes around the tree, right?
Yes, sir.
And there's this little notches that'll stick into the tree.
Yes.
Okay, let's do this. I know this is a chair, but the purpose of this is just twofold. Because I can't elevate myself, all right? If your feet are on the platform and the straps are in, all right, we're going to take this one step at a time, all right? And it's hooked to the tree, right? In order to inch this up, you actually bring your both feet up, right?
No, sir. It's hard to describe. The seat you're sitting on is it's permeable. It's not solid, so you can move.
I understand that, and I said, I understand this is a chair, and I understand the seat is actually on the second part.
Yes.
Okay, but I'm just trying to get the movement of the feet so I don't fall down.
You
So
don't
you
have
pull them both up.
You don't have to bring above 90 degrees with your feet. The seat section on the top section is actual cloth, so it allows your butt to rotate. So you only have to go from a standing position to only bringing your knees maybe to a 45 degree. You don't have to bring your knees all the way up to 90 degrees to bring the base up.
All right. So if you're like this, you're standing, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, now I'm going, like I'm on the seat, you still have to bring them up.
You bring them up a little bit, yes.
Yeah, in order to come up. And you come up maybe 6 inches or so.
You can do it from 1 inch to a foot if you have the ability.
Okay. So you bring them up using your hip flexors and your back and your stomach muscles, your core muscles to bring it up.
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, once it's up in that position, then you have to use the same muscles to stand up.
You stand up, yes, sir.
All right. Then you have to move the second part. Right?
Yes, sir.
And the second part with the wrap around the tree, you actually pick it up using your forearm, your biceps, your shoulders, and you pick it straight up, right?
Yes, sir.
And then you hook it into the tree,
Yes.
right? And then the process begins all over again.
Yes.
All right. So the muscles that you're using as far as going up and down, you're using your hip flexors, your core, your back to pull up. You stand up, and then you're using your forearms, biceps, and shoulders to pick it up, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And your father went up about 10 feet in that tree, right?
Yes, sir.
And if you're only going up, let's make the math easy, okay? you're only going up 6 inches at a time, you're gonna do that, what, more than 20 times to get up 10 feet?
Yes, sir.
Okay. But then you gotta come down, right?
Yes, sir.
And it's just the reverse process.
Yes.
All right, so it's another 20 times that you have to come back down, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, your father chose to do that approximately 1 week before this incident, correct?
Yes.
All right. And it was his choice to use that process to go 10 feet up a tree.
Yes, sir.
Okay. He didn't say, you know, son, I've assessed this situation, and because of the way my body is right now, I just don't feel comfortable doing it. If I fall, maybe I won't recover. There's no apprehension on his part based on his physical ability to perform that task that he related to you.
He didn't need to.
Did he relate to you, no, I don't want to do this because of my physical condition, I just don't feel comfortable doing it? He never said that, right?
No.
He just hooked up the apparatus to the tree and shimmied right up that tree, didn't he?
No, sir. I hooked the stand to the tree.
What?
I put the stand on the tree.
Just putting the strap around.
Yeah, I did that part of
He
it.
got into the apparatus,
Yes, sir.
and he went up the tree.
Yes.
And then once it got up the tree, he had to get his bow, right?
Yes, sir.
And it's attached to a rope.
Yes.
And so then he pulled up his bow.
Yes, sir.
And then you're facing the tree, then you turn around and you sit down so you're facing out now, right?
Yes, sir.
And it's narrow, it's small, right?
It's not tiny. It's,
Okay, but that brings us to the next point. There's been testimony that a week later, your dad was 6'1", 6 feet 2 inches, 270 pounds. That's the man that went up that tree and sat in that tree stand, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. I want to go back to your contact with your father inside the movie theater after your contact with Mr. Oulson. I'm going to change it, all right? I told you if I went off topic, I'd give you a heads up, right?
Okay.
I've decided to go someplace else. Let's talk about when you're down at the bottom of the stairs, after the shot is fired and you see the person that you saw.
I had
Okay.
already moved up some. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. All right, let's talk about that. You indicated to us that when you looked up in this area that you've described as nearly pitch black, you were able to see someone standing, correct?
Not when I initially looked up.
As you keep going up, maybe one step or two, you see a person standing,
At the time of the shot, when the body was silhouetted, yes.
okay? And as you went up, you still saw him standing.
Yes.
All right. And then you told this jury that you saw him take an exaggerated step down. You remember that testimony?
Yes, sir.
In fact, I even think he said a large exaggerated step. Right?
I know it was an exaggerated step.
Okay. So, what is that? What did you see? I know what you said. What did you see? Can you describe it? Are we coming over chairs? Are we standing in a seat and getting back down? What are we doing?
I stated there was a chance that he could have stepped down a row, but I did not know that if he did or not. He took a large step.
That's your testimony.
Yes, sir.
All right. Clearly, that's what you saw.
Yes, sir.
Like he was stepping down a row.
There was I never stated he did step down a row, but it was as if he had.
That's your description.
Yes, sir.
So the jury has it in mind like he was stepping down a row. Right?
Yes, sir.
Like he was stepping off from the top of a chair. Right?
Yes, sir.
That's the impression you want to leave with this jury. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Now let's go to your contact with Mr. Oulson. You get there, that's done, then you go up a couple of steps, you turn, you go over to where your father is, and your testimony was that his glasses were askew. One of his lenses was below his eye. Remember that testimony?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, you would agree with me, wouldn't you, that from the time you heard the shot to the time you got up there was a minute,
May have been more.
maybe even more. And when you got there, you saw the off-duty officer there standing next to him, right?
I didn't know he was at the time.
But you knew that he had the firearm.
Yes.
He told you he had the firearm.
My father told me that he had the firearm.
And while your father was sitting there and you were talking to him, and the other off-duty officer was standing there with your father, his glasses were askew and the lens was below his eye.
Yes, sir.
And the entire time that you were there, your father never took his glasses and put them back on where you're supposed to wear them, right?
I don't recall.
That's your testimony that they were askew.
Yes, sir.
You're still a firearm instructor?
No, sir.
When did you lose your cert?
I let my cert go around 2011.
So in 2014, you were not a certified law enforcement firearms instructor?
Yes, sir.
You were not?
I was not.
Okay. You were up until 2011.
Around that time frame, yes, sir.
All right. And Florida Department of Law Enforcement has a specific course that you go through in order to be a certified law enforcement firearm instructor.
Yes, sir.
40-hour course.
Yes.
All right. And in that course, you're taught to not only be proficient as to determining whether or not an officer has met the Florida standards for proficiency,
Your Honor,
but
irrelevant and beyond the scope of the
No.
right?
no, it's not. I mean, we can come to the bench, but
I'll give you a little leeway. Overruled for now.
you're also taught to make sure that the range is safe, right?
Yes, sir.
As an
Right,
instructor.
irrelevant?
Judge, can we approach?
Yeah, come on.
prior to 2013, did you have an occasion to go to Shooter's World with your dad?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you've been with him when he has shot his pistol and his revolver?
Yes.
Okay. Now, your father, your sister testified suffered from what, trigger finger, you know about that?
Yes, sir.
Right. And the finger just locks up, maybe one, maybe the whole hand, right?
I know a couple fingers.
Okay. Does that ever cause you any concerns when you're at the range or out hunting with your dad while he's handling a firearm, that his hand might just lock up and make the gun
It's
go off?
not the sense of locking up, as in contracting. It's more if he can't bend it.
And that contracting is what pulls the trigger, right?
Yes, sir.
Redirect?
All right. Now, the prosecutor asked you questions framed by, well, is that your testimony? Is that your testimony? Yes or no? Is your idea of testimony telling the truth?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, I object.
Sustained.
How about this? Is your idea of testimony giving answers to the questions as you know those answers to be?
Yes.
Sustained.
Okay, let me ask you this. Now the prosecutor talked to you about climbing, your dad climbing a tree with a tree stand. Remember that part?
Yes, sir.
Were you or were you not present sometime after January 13th, 2014, and today, where your mother having
Your Honor,
actually...
I object. Relevant.
Approach.
Before my father had one.
All right. And was it hard for you to use?
Your Honor, I object.
Overruled.
It's not relevant as far as 402, Judge, and 403.
I'll allow a couple
May we
of
approach?
questions. All right, come on.
back to the tree stand. You had a tree stand first, is that what you said?
That brand, yes.
All right, and did you buy one for your father?
I don't recall if I bought it, but it was a replacement for an older style that was much heavier.
All right, so was it a lighter model?
Yes, much lighter.
And being lighter, I imagine that no matter who used it, that it would be easier to use than a heavier one.
Your Honor,
Sustained.
Okay. By lighter, do you mean it weighs less?
Weighs less and it's easier to use.
Okay. So is that the model that your father used on that hunting trip?
Yes.
I don't have anything else, thank you.
Thank you. May this witness be released?
no, Your Honor, he's under my subpoena.
All right, very good. Counsel approach. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've reached a stopping point for the day. So I'm going to go ahead and let you go. Enjoy your weekend. Remember my instructions. Be very careful, please. No news, no discussions, no internet searches. Just be very mindful, and should you get exposed to something, please make note of, telling me, and but look away or shut it off immediately, okay? All right. Any questions? We'll start at 8:30 Monday, all right? So be here a little early, like whatever you guys have to do with the clerk in the morning, and then we'll get started. All right? Thank you all very much. Have a great weekend.